In this video, we're going to make a quick tutorial where we're going to make a rubber ball bounce down a set of stairs but also deform. And the things we'll look at during the video are how to use soft body simulation, how to use a HDRI with a moving camera, how to use texture painting, controlling the camera by hand so it looks as though it's more natural camera movement, and how you can smooth out jerky keyframes using the keyframe editor, automatically setting up materials from a selection of texture images so that you don't have to manually wire all the textures into the principal shader. We'll take a look at several modifiers, basic modeling, and also some EEVEE render settings as well. So let's get started. We'll choose the cube. I'm going to Control 2 to add some subdivisions to it, and then we'll go into the modifiers tab, Control A. That will apply that. I'm going to make it into a proper sphere, so choose the cast modifier, then set the factor to 1, and then apply that. There we go. So we'll now add the set of stairs. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane, into Edit Mode, number 2, and I'll select that edge, and holding Shift, select this edge, S, and then X to scale them outwards. And just make sure your faces are still pointing the right way. So go and make sure it's blue, not red. It needs to be blue pointing upwards. If you scale them in the wrong direction, then it'll turn red. Basically, you invert it. If that happens, just scale it back out, or alternatively, press Shift N with the faces selected. So back into edit mode, number 2. I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to move this up on the Z axis by 1.3 meters. So E, Z, 1.3. And then I'm going into vertex mode. I'm going to select this vertex in the bottom left-hand corner, and then I'm going to press A to select them all. And by selecting that one first, it makes sure that that is the active vertex. And I'm going to go into the snap options at the top here and change that to vertex, but change it from closest to active. And now, if I press Shift D, I can move all this and snap that to there. By pressing Control, I can press Shift R a number of times until we've got a good sized set of steps. Something like that. Press A to select all vertices, and then M, and I'll choose by distance to merge them, and that's got rid of 36 vertices. And now go into edge mode, select this bottom edge, and I'm going to move that on the Y axis, so somewhere about there. That'll do. Right then, so let's turn off that facing mode. Select the sphere. Make sure you're on frame 1, so Shift left arrow puts it to frame 1. Shift right arrow, by the way, takes it to 250, or whatever you've got the end set as. So on frame 1, got the ball selected. Let's go into side mode, and then into the orthographic. Go into wireframe mode so we can see where the steps are. Still got the ball selected. I want to move that ball so it's just above the angle of the step, just to the left, so that when it falls, it's going to pick up momentum off of that step. Okay, so let's add a physics to the ball. So go into the physics tab. I'm going to choose a soft body because I want it to deform as it goes down the steps, and choose the stairs, and then we're going to make that a collision. If I press play, it's just going to float around, not actually moving, and that's because we need to turn off the goal. The goal is what tells it tries to maintain the initial position of the vertices. So we'll turn that off, and now it will fall down. So obviously it's not working as we want it to. It's deforming a bit too much. So what we're going to do is go into the edges options, and this is where we can set the parameters that will control how much the edges and the vertices of this sphere, or the object you've chosen, can deform, and how they do it. So the pull and the push, this controls how stiff the edges become, depending on whether or not the edges have expanded, they're longer, or they've contracted they're shorter. So pull and push basically. I'm going to set these to become equally stiff on pull and push. And now it won't work straight away. And the reason is, these don't seem to take effect unless you've got something in the bending. So if I put 0.1 in there, you can see they're now taking effect. It's a bit too much, so I'm going to change these down to maybe 0.6. Let's try that. That's not enough. And by the way, the bending value, the higher it is, the less it can bend. Anyway, we'll put this to 0.8. That's a bit better. I think I would like a little bit of bounce though, so I'll put this up to 0.6. And because it can bend less, it's going to be springier and it will bounce. There we are. You see it tries to return to its initial form. I think you can think of that bending as a multiplier for the push and pull. At least that's how it seems to work. Alright, so it's not long enough for it to get to the bottom of the stairs. I'm going to change that to 500. I need to do the same in the cache for the simulation, for the soft body. And now, see it's making its way down the stairs. So the last things we'll do then, I might make this a little bit bigger in fact. Control A, apply the scale. Always make sure you apply the scale when you're working with physics. Okay, so we're going to bring up this bottom panel and we're going to give it a material. So choose the shader editor. And I've gone into sort of EEVEE, viewport shaded mode, not solid mode. And I'm going to give this a new texture. So Shift A, S to search, and then Shift A, S, texture. Let's go image text. There we are, image texture. Click new. I'll stick with the default and I'll call it ball. Click OK. And now I'll hook that up to the base color. You can see it's black, so there's no color in there. And I'm going to do tab and choose texture paint. We'll go to the paint bucket. I'm going to fill this ball in to be red. And let's just come out of there. F3 and I'll choose smooth. And I might actually just put a subdivision modifier on. That will come after the soft body. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay, that's pretty good. So back into texture paint mode. I'm going to choose paintbrush now. Probably change that fall off to be, let's bring it sort of maybe a bit, we don't want it to be quite falling off quite that much, so something like this, I think. Just give it a bit of a soft edge. Alright, so I give it an eyeball there and an eyeball there, and I want to turn on stabilize stroke under the stroke options. And now if I make that a bit smaller, so F, bring that brush size down, you see we can draw a nice smooth shape for the mouth. A bit too much there. I think those eyeballs are a little bit too soft, so let's just turn on the far right hand side fall off. That's the most harsh edge. And now this will give it a nice harsh edge. Oh, we need to turn off the stroke stabilize. There we are. And let's turn that back to red. Bring that brush size down. There we go. And we'll probably make it shiny because everything looks better shiny. And we'll bake that simulation in. So we go into Physics tab, into Cache, and we'll just choose Bake. So it's a bit faster in the viewport. Maybe give these steps a colour as well. A bit blue. Make them shiny. And the last thing is to sort the camera out. So I'll select the camera and I'll press N on the keyboard. We'll go into the view menu and just change camera to view. Enable that, and that will mean that if you go into camera mode now, you'll actually be moving the camera rather than just the viewport. And we're going to bring this back to the timeline now, the bottom one. I'll turn on record, press play, and we can record as we go down the stairs. I'm controlling the camera the same way as I would the viewport. I'm just holding the mouse wheel down and moving the mouse to look around. And when I want to zoom in and out, I'm pressing Control on the keyboard and then pushing the mouse forwards and backwards, like so. So we've recorded the camera motion. It's a bit messy, so what I'm going to do is make it a bit smoother, and we'll go into the graph editor for that, and you can see it looks really jittery because my mouse is not the best DPI. So what I'm going to do is just smooth that out. So first thing, right click, I'm going to change it to be a linear, and then press home so we can see everything. And now if I press Alt O, you can see it gets smoother. And now if I play this back, then the camera motion is much smoother. Bit jerky at the beginning there, so let's just go in and look at that. Where does it? Just there, a bit too jerky there. I think maybe what I'll do is choose all of them, choose key, and I'm going to sample them. If I can find it, sample keyframes, and now if I do Alt O, that will smooth it even more, so I don't get that jerky bit at the beginning. And now let's try playing this back. And it gives it a more sort of handheld camera movement. So to finish off, I'm just going to show you how you can use a HDRI with a moving camera. Normally you can only have your camera stationary because that's how a HDRI is photographed, with a stationary camera. And this is what happens if you don't use the method I'm going to show you. The 3D geometry will look as though it's floating around. So the HDRI is moving obviously with the camera, but if you look at the geometry, the HDRI isn't sort of zooming in and out and moving in unison. Alright? So to fix this, what we're going to do is come out of camera mode first, and Shift A, we're going to add a cylinder. I'm going to scale that right up. Let's just come out a little bit, wireframe, so I can see. So S, we'll scale it up. I want it quite large. So I need to increase that end clip to maybe 5,000 so we can see everything. Turn on overlays, and we must apply the scale, very importantly. And what we'll do now is select the bottom face of that, and I want to align that with the bottom of the steps. Let's bring that up. I'm going to snap it to the bottom of that step by holding Control. Let's just turn on screencast keys, sorry. So I'll just show you that again. If you move something and you've got the vertex snap mode enabled, not enabled, but you've got vertex snap mode chosen, you can hold Control key and just hover your mouse over a vertex and it will snap to that. Alright, so that's that done. Come out of orthographic mode. So basically what we're going to do, and we're going to take the HDRI, Control C, and we'll go into the object mode of the node editor, give it a new material, come out of edit mode briefly, and we'll go into material preview. We're going to paste this HDRI in there, and you've got to use the Shift A, S, environment texture. Don't use a normal image texture. You've got to use an environment texture. And we'll plug this into the base object. And if we go to 0, we need to go to the camera settings and just increase the end clip to make it a bit big so we can see it all. So obviously that's not correct. It's moving, but it's not UV'd correctly. So click on that again. With the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, press Ctrl-T, and this will set up these two nodes for you. What we can do then is change it from generated to object, and then we need to tell it which object to use, and we're going to use the cylinder, so itself. And what happens is it's going to use the origin of the cylinder to project the HDRI from. So we need to move the origin, and to do that, click on the options at the top and choose the origins option. And now, if we press G and then Z, we can move that upwards until it starts to look about right. And now if we play this back, just make sure you turn off specular, and then play this back. You can see now that the HDRI is actually respecting the camera movement. We just need to get rid of that flickering, so let's bring that floor down. Oh, still got origins turned on, so make sure you turn origins off, otherwise you can't move the geometry. And I'll just move that down a tiny bit. In fact, let's do that. And now you can see everything's moving correctly with the camera. Some HDRIs will work better than others. It all depends on the vertical parts of the HDRI. Vertical parts of the HDRI, for example, this lamppost, need to be on the vertical part of that cylinder. And to make this of a less sort of obvious transition from the horizontal to the vertical, what we can do is just come out of this mode briefly, and we're going to edit mode again, into wireframe mode. We can select the bottom edge and also the top edge, Ctrl B, and we can just bevel those a little bit, and that will make it a less obvious transition. So now, if I go back into material preview, you can see it's a gentler progression from horizontal to vertical. You've got to be careful though, because if you get any vertical parts, for example that lamppost, go back into origins. If that's on a horizontal part, you can see we're getting this weird sort of it doesn't look right. It's bending. So you need to make sure the vertical parts are on the vertical wall, preferably just where it transitions. Let's play that back. And there we go. So that's how you get a HDRI to follow the camera movement in 3D space. All right. And we'll just make a few other little things, a few little tweaks. And regarding the render, I think this blue material, obviously, that's no good. So let's add a texture to this, and Ctrl-Shift-T this time with the Node Wrangler enabled. And then we can go into your texture, where you keep your textures, and just choose anything you want. So maybe I'll go with brick. And then you can select which images you want to use for your material. So I'm going to use this one, this one. We'll go with a specular and a roughness, and we'll hook those up. We need to add UVs very easily. So select the stairs, go into edit mode, number 3, press A, and then press U, and then we'll just go with a simple cube projection. And then we can scale that by Shift-A-S, add a value, plug this in there, and then we can control that with one slider. It's a bit too light, so let's go and reduce the brightness with an RGB curve. We'll drop that on there, and then we can bring that right down. We'll come out of edit mode. Let's turn overlays off as well. So we can bring that right down, somewhere about there. And maybe make it look a bit wet, so I'm going to copy this one, Shift D, and then put this onto the roughness. And now we can also control how wet it is, how rough it is. So if we bring that down, it's going to be more shiny, and obviously because it's a wet environment, that would be fitting. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much, I'm not going to do much with the model. I just want to show you the technique so that you can do it yourself, you know, with whatever model you want. And I think finally, we'll add some depth of field. So into the camera, I've already got a bit of depth of field, but the problem is, because this is the origin for this sphere is remaining stationary. If you play that, you'll notice that origin isn't moving. So basically the depth of field is always going to be looking at that, and we need it to be looking at this ball as it moves. And it's pretty easy, so Shift S, and then we'll choose to move the cursor to the selected, which is the origin of this item. And we're going to Shift A and add an empty. Let's just scale it up a bit so we can see it. Can we scale the empty? Should be able to. We'll change it there. Alright, and we need to make this empty move with this ball. But we can't do it by parenting it directly to the ball because it will just stay with the origin. So what we need to do is select that first, the empty, and then select the ball, and then go into edit mode, press number 1 to choose vertex mode, and choose any 3 vertices, and then press Ctrl P and make vertex parent. And now, if we come out of edit mode, that will actually follow that down. So go into the camera, and we can choose depth of field, and instead of using the cube, we can click on that empty, go into camera mode, we turn that f-stop right down. Let's turn the overlays off, and also actually let's turn the viewport display passive part out so we can't see the rest of it. And now we're getting depth of field, and it's always focusing on that ball. Probably a bit too much, so let's just turn that up a little bit. We don't want to lose all the background, maybe about there. And you'll probably notice one of the massive benefits of projecting a HDRI onto actual geometry is that the depth of field now works correctly on the HDRI, which normally isn't possible. And let's go now with the EEVEE settings. We'll turn on a bit of bloom, and we'll turn on some motion blur. The higher the shutter speed, the more motion blur you're going to get. I think that bloom's a bit too high, so I will decrease the intensity somewhere about there. And you'll notice how nicely that is moving with the 3D geometry now. Until right at the end, it will just drop through the floor. And I believe that is probably about it. If you want to rotate the HDRI, all you need to do is go into the Z rotation on here, and you can move that around to wherever you want it. And there we go. So I hope you found the tutorial useful. And don't forget to check out my shop, which is 3d-illusions.co.uk. There is a 75% discount currently on the 3-story house. You can get the discount code from my other video, Cycles versus Cycles X. And I hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.